Welcome back, everyone, to the Total Carnage listen through of the Irons album called Far From Optimal. I'm Admin1 of Vinny Effects. We left off about 20 minutes in. I'm going to start just a bit before then. And I believe where I left off last time was in talking about the kind of blurring lines at about this point in the track. And maybe a bit before then as well. The line blurred between what sounds like speech samples and what sound like just straight up noise samples. Everything's kind of melting together, and I feel like, at least in my interpretation, this track, if not this entire release, is kind of taking us from the outside in to some kind of a dimension or structure. And I feel like as we go in, we're further inside or closer to, the source of sounds, in the imagined universe. Irons Imagine Universe. So, let's begin.
Solution.
Yeah, I noted things got a bit more hushed for the most part, but the speech samples were louder. Yet things are starting to build up in here, like you feel something kind of brewing, almost like glowing.
It is a terribly important thing. Problems of man's activities.
It kind of sounds like we're switching through a dial on a stereo or radio.
Solution.
It also sounds like souls of the insane seeking vengeance upon the seeker or discoverer. I'm hearing the introduction of new drones that kind of launch and sort of taper off. Whether in pitch or volume or both. And yet this one, just as I was starting to say that, it started picking back up. I might do a lot of hiccups in this video for some reason. The speech samples are still going on, but there's kind of a more upper frequency drone going on now, and it's a bit of a buzz, almost like static. And it seems a bit hostile. Oh boy, I heard like a springing noise all of a sudden. It's like once the tone is set for that with that kind of constant high buzz, then it kind of warrants the introduction of sudden, punctuating sounds, and already they're becoming more frequent. It's kind of gone back down to a dull hum. I think I heard the words Vice President Truman. There's another spring noise from earlier. So it's like now that they've been warranted by the introduction of the previous high frequency drone, now they're just continuing regardless of the fact that that drone has more or less gone away. Now there's kind of a constant static sound going, but it's more mid-frequency. So in multiple regards, you get the sense of like a radio. I heard that Vice President Truman loop come back. It's like you're in a room with multiple radios or something like that. Almost like some kind of a control room of a certain nature and operation that you can't really understand. It's human, but it's alien. It seems to be in keeping with a lot of the themes of this album, ranging from even just the artwork itself to, I think, the use of Burroughs and I think L. Ron Hubbard of Scientology infamy, dealing with a lot of fringe thought, so to speak. And here again, I'm hearing a different drone that harkens back to earlier, where it sounds almost like a distant alarm, like an air raid siren almost. It's kind of going up and down. Yeah, actually, this sounds more like that than I think the drone I'm thinking of from towards the beginning that I covered in the last video. it's one pattern that I like about this release is that, certain parts seem to be warranted or added on to new parts. Like, what I'm trying to say is that, a new part will come and it'll serve as the bedrock for something new. Then that initial new thing gets cut out, and sometimes that newer thing along with it, so you think it's gone or perhaps limited to that sound or that mood, but then it comes back regardless, that newer thing. I'm not really explaining it very well. Basically, it's like if you have layer 1 and then it gives way to layer 2, and layer 2 warrants layer 3 on top of it, and they seem to go together, then eventually layer 2 and 3 go away. So on some level you tend to associate layer 3 with layer 2, especially if they're kind of in the same range of intensity or the like. But then even when it's back to layer 1 or something similar to that, layer 3 comes back. So it's like you're never free from any of the madness that you encounter at any other point in the release. Already I'm talking so much I'm kind of missing out on some of the parts. I think I should scroll back a bit. Now it sounds like the speech samples are tapering off somewhat. They're not only becoming more infrequent and subdued when they do appear, but they're at a lower pitch now, almost like the broadcasting system is malfunctioning even more than it already was, seemingly. And the kind of air raid sounds like it's coming from more outside now, which is what I identify with it in the first place, based on the earlier part of this piece. But for a bit there, it sounded present even while we were supposedly inside, and now it sounds more outside again. And it's as though what's happening out there is affecting what's happening inside, that the speech samples would be so reduced that they still kind of bubble up every here and there. Now they're sounding almost reversed at points. You have to really listen for them. Looks like we're getting close to the end of this track. 4 tracks in all. Actually, wait, no. It's still the first track, so it's 3 tracks. Looks like this track is more or less ended. He's just giving a gap of silence for this one called the Raconteur. Oh boy. This sounds a bit like the... Actually, am I even allowed to say, give away that I listened to? What I listened to, but... It sounds like something I've heard from Irons before, put it that way. So, these speech samples sound even less comprehensible, even though they're louder in the mix. There's kind of a warbling, atonal noise in the background that's moving in and out. Definitely gives a UFO feeling there as well. Now I really can't make out words. It's like the speech samples are more like syllable samples, vocal utterance samples. They're kind of warping up and down, much like the noise underneath it is, but not in the same way or in sync per se. It's like these 2 concurrent streams of madness. It's a bit funny because the track just launched right into it. There wasn't like a build-up the way there was at the beginning. It's like a sudden drop down into insanity. If we consider this track, and for that matter, the whole album to be connected in terms of a journey, then one could say that we've dropped underground into the structure, out of earshot of the outer world that we encountered in the beginning. And of course, this is all my interpretation. I might be far off from what Irons had in mind. But if nothing else, it's a very compelling journey. I foresee myself listening to this more often. It's quite a mountain. Oh, now I'm hearing something different. Almost like a zipping noise, as though it were largely produced by some kind of physical movement of one thing into or onto another. Yeah, this new noise that's popping up over the usual two streams. It's hard to say if these new layers I'm hearing are more or less from the same source, meaning like the same apparatus or synth or whatever configuration Irons may be using for it, that just kind of sound like they're different because they're at different pitches. It's still like this semi-aggressive zipping noise to them. And now I get sort of a washing noise that's kind of moving in and out. Some kind of sliding noises. Now a bit like a wind noise. These things are slowly building on top of each other and coalescing at different points. I imagine at some point they'll start to take center stage, and maybe these initial two streams that I'm hearing since the beginning, namely the warbled speech and the constant, how do I describe it, warbling synth line underneath it, will drop out, at least for the time being. I am starting to hear, though, a bit of a pattern to these speech warblings, like I'm starting to recognize as some of the same little blurbs coming back again. And some of the upper layers are starting to more or less rest and sit where they're not necessarily oscillating in any way. It's like a layer of static, almost like a layer of dust that's sitting on top of everything. Almost cloaking everything else a little bit, but you can still hear everything else. At least as much as you can, given that they're stacking on top of each other, and it's getting a bit hard to differentiate which is which among the whole din of what's happening. I think I'm starting to make out the words North Heaven. Whoa. I started hearing almost like a feedback noise that kind of moved in and moved out. Like it wasn't a sudden jab, but it was still fairly quick. There we go. I'm hearing sound like synth hits every here and there. Yep. Getting louder, getting longer, more frequent. And here again, there's a sense of one of these layers resting, at least for a little bit. It just stopped, but it was an upper frequency, yet it wasn't just like a constant, undifferentiating static like what I mentioned earlier, which is still there, by the way, but rather it was like a constant washing pattern. It kind of went. It oscillated in pitch and volume, so it sounded more like a regular siren rather than the air raid one that I mentioned earlier. Now I'm starting to hear new speech, but it's louder and high pitched, faster too. But it just popped up in a little blurb and then it went away. I think, in a way, Irons is building up all these different layers pretty gradually. At first just introducing them pretty sparingly and having them pop in and out on rare occasion, and over time just making them more common. And after a certain point, all these layers will become likely constant enough that they just merge into one big wall of sound. Perhaps it's too soon to say, but it seems like, especially given that the track is shorter anyways, and I think we're already, over halfway through it, it progresses more linearly than the first track, but not directly linearly. I should say it proceeds more linearly in the sense that, the initial layers or drones last at least longer, if not through the whole track. And there's an overall trend upward in terms of intensity. Of course, as I say that, it sounded like for a moment it dipped just a little bit, but it seems like, since the beginning, everything has gotten more intense. Things may drop out for a little bit, but at that point, usually much more has been added on than has been dropped off, and then things that have been dropped off, they tend to return. There probably will be. Whoa, that scared me a little bit. There probably will be a bit of a cool down, but more towards the end. And it'll be a shorter, more sudden, I think, than the cool down, more or less, that we heard in the last track. But anyway, it sounds like Irons is trying all sorts of different types of noises in terms of, the texture of them and how constant they are, how much they oscillate. The effect they tend to have, whether they're scraping, sweeping, warbling, glowing, however you like to describe it. I'll have to review the ways that he talked about making this. I know he mentioned it in the description, and he also, of course, left that helpful comment in my first video. And thanks, by the way, for that, Irons. I don't think I thanked you for that before, but I'd like to kind of imagine how to mentally bridge the gap between what he's talked about doing to create this and how that could have been done to produce these sounds in this way. I know as much that it involved a lot of cassette recording, actually. Yeah, now it's calming down more. Now the sounds sound more big and opening yet distant too. There's more noises akin to wind, and the speech samples are more echoed. Sounds like we're in a a bigger room or something now. So think of it again in terms of the imagined journey of the release. We started out outside overground, ventured inward, dropped down underground while inside, and then stepped outside of the structure into the outside of the underworld. Something like that. Now it's almost like a chorus of mumblers. There are more speech samples happening at once. Varying volumes. A lot of them have become buried. Oh, we're at the end of the track. Yeah, my prediction on the way it would calm down was correct, it seems. So this next one is called East Then North. Heard a faint, dull, low drone, and then it tapered off. It's almost like it stuttered off. Now it sounds like it's kind of like being started up again, as if manually. There's a faint static throughout this whole thing, like we're hearing a transmission again. Now I feel like there's a line being blurred between drones and sampled noises like wind. Because this drone I'm hearing right now has a quality sort of like wind, kind of intermittent. But it's strange because just when you think you've got a grasp on the kind of pattern that's happening, it changes. Not to mention that the pauses between drones seems becoming shorter and also less frequent overall. But what I was talking about, or the thing that made me think about it, feel like saying it, was that up until a certain point, the drones would there was a sense of connectivity, like no disconnection at all, even where there were pauses between, and then all of a sudden, instead of building up linearly, it's like there was a cut, and it just suddenly went up, and I think I even heard like a clip or a clicking noise, like two different samples of this drone or noise were spliced. That's the noise you'll hear often in the effects music because I'm not always the most graceful about splicing parts together. We're getting speech again. I feel like we're now sort of like in the outskirts of the underground. It's almost as though we're taking the voices with us. Maybe we've come to embody them, or perhaps we've taken some kind of mobile device that transmits them. But the signal appears to be a bit weaker. Because the speech samples right now that are more buried and I think in some ways even more incomprehensible, although I can make out some words still, like something to do with codes. Oh, there it is again, that slight clicking noise from what sounds like spliced samples. In the meantime, oh, it's a rising kind of high frequency hum. It sounds kind of intense, a bit oppressive. Like there's some menace we're encountering. It's gone away. It's almost as though this really is wind, but in a different dimension, and thus of a different nature than we're used to. Come to think of it, I wonder what sorts of themes or plot can be gleaned from this just based off of the speech samples. What of them are even comprehensible? And especially thinking on the background of each of them, which I have yet to do. I'm not as well versed in, say, Burroughs or Hubbard as Irons might be. I haven't really delved into them very much. Now it sounds like one of the drones has been converted from a bit more of a, how to describe it, warbling one to a smooth sliding one. But that was just brief. I imagine that was the start of a growing pattern, though. Taken up with the codes, that's what I heard. Yeah, it sounds like we're on the outskirts, kind of encountering these ambient phenomena or creatures kind of passing by, some sorts of entities we don't understand. But again, I suppose, yeah, it is still kind of an outskirts sort of feeling because I feel like we're in the thick of something, but I'm also hearing these noises that sound like, well, they're echoed and reverbed to an extent, in the ways that most of the noises happening throughout this track aren't. So it feels like we're kind of caught in the eye of not like a storm, except perhaps figuratively, but there's still something happening beyond us that more reverberates off of the faraway walls, big open area underground. Still, some of these layers and sounds do appear to be triggered by a certain point of other ones, as though they're connected or sampled and looped together, almost like a call and response thing. Like right about when this high-pitched drone peaks, there's a noise. Yep, there again. It's like a bit of a warping, flipping noise, and it loops, echoes a bit, but still tapers off. It happens every time when you hear that high-pitched drone as it increases in volume, like it's doing right now, and it suddenly changes pitch as well. And then right there, hearing a new one now though, over the top of that. It seems as though this is structured, or maybe just conveniently improvised, in such a way that just about the moment that you start to identify patterns of what it otherwise sounds like, you know, just kind of uh, more free-flung noise, you start to pick up on the loops, then something new comes up. But they're not easily identifiable at first. Mm. But every now and then you get little oddities like that. Like, I mean, I don't know if that one might well come back, but it was a speech sample that not only increased in uh, pitch and volume, but also speed because it was looped. It just kind of went up and up and it went faster until it went to almost like a chipmunk pitch. It was a speech sample. Oh, there it goes again. Twice. Not much room left for it to happen though, since it's a minute and a half left. Yeah, there's a lot of more chipmunky voices here. And the speech samples are being manipulated more often in more divergent directions, I think, than ever before. At points, it sounds rhythmic in ways you didn't necessarily hear earlier in the record. East to the north. There's probably some esoteric significance to that, especially given the themes and the sources of the samples and ideas. Oh wow, and then it all of a sudden gets swallowed up into the void. Well, I enjoy that, and I do enjoy those kinds of structured, abstract, even rather haunting noise releases. Obviously, since I like Bowl of Heaven. But thank you for sharing that with us, Irons. I look forward to any more stuff you may make, or any more stuff you've already made that I will discover. I know there's a lot to it, from your music to your writings to your marathon content development and such. But until then, thanks everyone for watching, and I look forward to sharing more releases with you like this, whether they're from marathon community members or totally outside of it. Hopefully, I'd like to pleasantly surprise someone who doesn't suspect that someone will go through and listen to their stuff and react this way. But we'll just see about it. Have a good one.